All right, everyone, welcome back to the channel. You saw the title of the video. I did get the Remote 3 back in my hands, and so we are back to making videos about it. You can see here that it is completely fixed. It is flush now. I can show you the other side as well, completely flush. Overall, happy with the experience that I had. It did take a little longer than I was expecting, but much of that is due to UPS, and I actually do think in terms of kind of, judging their repair process, it's not particularly fair to factor in UPS. So I sent it back, and they received the package on July 30th, and they had it back out to me, picked up by August 6th. So didn't take them too long on their end. I didn't end up getting the remote until the 15th, a couple days ago, but nonetheless, as soon as I cracked it out of its packaging, I inspected it. They did give me the same remote back. It had all of my configuration on it. I think it may be a new screen that they put in. Not too sure, but overall, I'm so excited to have this thing back, and making more videos, making more content, tinkering around with it. And so, while it was getting repaired, I actually did decide to start investing in a smart light solution, and I picked Philips Hue. I've had previous experiences with living with Hue, and I liked them a lot. And they're kind of one of the more robust solutions for that. And you definitely pay the price for it. They are not cheap. But I feel like setting up the lights was also going to be a good opportunity for me to really explore multi-room functionality of the Remote 3, which we'll touch on a little bit later. But while I was, waiting for the remote to be repaired, I spent a lot of time in the Hue app setting up scenes natively, in Hue, and just tinkering around with it, getting the lights set up, setting up the room, setting up my Hue bridge, and in general, that all went really seamlessly. All of the bulbs got detected right away. There wasn't really a big issue with integrating it with Hue at all, and so I'm happy with the results. But then, I get the remote back, and I'm excited to then get the remote integrated with Hue, and I'm not too particularly excited with the native integration that's offered with the Remote 3 in its current state. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about it, what I like, what I don't like. I kind of had all of my lighting scenes in Hue that I could have pictured that I wanted. Probably wired it down to my kind of like top 4 or 5. Really excited. Got them set up in the living room as well. So some scenes that I like there. And so if we jump into the configurator here, setting up the actual Hue integration was pretty easy. You just start the setup. You do next, it's going to essentially find my Hue bridge on the network. I click on it, then you press the little button on the Hue bridge like every application asks you to do. Not a big deal. You're then able to add each individual Hue light as an entity, which, as we know, basically everything in Unfolded Circle Land is an entity. An activity is an entity, a device, etc. brings that in. So pretty nice there. I've got, 2 lights for my theaters and 3 lights in my living room. So a total of 5 Philips Hue lights. And so naturally, I get them set up. I go to like my Watch Apple TV activity, and I'm really excited to go to my user interface, give myself some lighting commands. And so when I go to, my second page here, I go click on a, quick icon button, and I do my Hue. Well, I notice here, if I go to light, I don't really have too much here. And so what I actually need to do is create a macro. Because, again, each light is an individual entity. I don't want to have to configure behavior for each light in one of my activities. So I can build a macro to solve for that. And you'll notice I have a handful here of macros that I've set up, all relating to lighting. So if I go to my theater lights on, pretty simple. I've got my 2 theater Hue bulbs here, and I have a sequence here to turn on the light, turn it on for each bulb, set my brightness all the way to 100%. And then if I go here to add a command, there is no command here that will allow me to enter my pre-configured scenes in the Hue app. So kind of a big miss here, where I spent a lot of time setting up the scenes that I like, and there's no easy way to recall them in the native Hue integration. So I think not a big deal. Maybe I'll just take time to configure some scenes in my own. Won't be too big of a deal. They do have the set color light here, But I'll show in post here in a second. This doesn't work. It doesn't register the colors accurately on the color wheel as it represents on my light. So it basically doesn't work. It's essentially useless. So there's just no way to access my hue scenes and no way to do any type of like accurate lighting profiles within the configurator. But at least I guess I can turn them on and off. And so that's kind of what I've opted to do here. Taking a deeper look at my macros, I've got, a turn theater lights on macro and off macro, a dim to 50%. I've got a living room lights on, a living room off, and then I have these two macros. So this is my white light theater macro. It's got, again, my two theater light entities already. And the sequence here is to just set the color temperature to kind of like the bluer white light. And the color temperature sliders do work. So that does work. So there is some functionality that I could bring in. But unfortunately, there's no way to, just add a scene changer in any of my activities. So if we go here, again, I'm going to kind of show you what I have configured now. It is just 4 kind of boring old light commands where I've got a general turn on my light. This is my set my lights to white command. This is my 50% dim, and this is a complete turn off command. So I've got that. Ideally, I'd love to be able to have some lighting scenes here. Maybe, I don't know, all 12 like I have here. That would be pretty cool. But unfortunately, that will probably have to wait until Home Assistant or this integration does get farther along. But there are some things that are still pretty neat that I am able to get done, particularly with my sequences here where now anytime I engage the theater, it will automatically turn my lights on. Same thing, it will automatically turn my lights off as well. I love that. That part I already could get used to. It's pretty nice. So my watch movie, for example, I have bigger plans for this when I get Home Assistant set up, but in this case, on its on sequence, the first thing it does is turn off my lights, which I think is kind of neat. So there is a little bit of lighting control that I'm able to get, but it is very limited. There's nothing really too advanced. You can't trigger your lights off of anything at the moment. And again, the idea of kind of going and having to set macros is slightly cumbersome here. But overall, you're able to get it to work well. So it works nicely. But I do think there is a big miss here not being able to bring in those scenes as well. But, I'm sure there's probably an explanation for that. And there's a lot more development overhead needed in other places, which I understand the team is trying to get at. So Philips Hue probably takes a back burner here. I figure anyone with super advanced, complex, smart lighting is already probably doing it through Home Assistant. So I get where they're coming from. But again, my interest is really just evaluating what I can do with the remote itself. And so I did want to kind of touch on one more thing here. And that's going to be, so that since I did set up Hue bulbs in my living room, I wanted to kind of explore with adding an additional room in Remote 3. So I did go, if we go here, and added a living room page as well, which I'm pretty stoked about. Let me go ahead and switch it here. And so you see here, I basically got 2 activities. I have a watch activity, watch TV, where I did set up my LG TV in my living room. And I have a control lights as well. So I'm actually using, if we go back here and we look at my integrations, I actually did get the WebOS integration set up for my living room TV. I was not able to get it for the OLED. And so for the OLED, I'm just using IR. And I think I'm just going to keep it that way because it's working. But in the living room where I am using a lot of the native apps on the TV for just casual viewing, I hardly ever really use that TV, but gave me an excuse to tinker with the remote. I did go ahead and just use the LG WebOS. And it did bring in 2 entities. It brought in just a living room controller entity and a media entity, but it doesn't seem to work. When I play media, it doesn't send it back to the remote. But I also built out, if I go to my activities, a control lights activities as well, where this is where I brought in my macros that you saw me build earlier. So my white light macro for my living room, a living room off, and a living room lights on. I didn't build the dimmer yet. I might configure that if I feel like it, but there's a really important part in getting all of this to work in that, this is why I now understand activity groups and how they work. More importantly, where again, If you notice, my watch TV is off, my control lights are on, but because these activities are not in the same activity group, so if I go to my activity groups, I have home theater, right? In my home theater activity group, I pretty much have all of my main activities that are related to the home theater. So the unfolded circle knows that these are all the same devices. That, if the Apple TV is not in use when I go to PS Play, PS5 Pro, well, it knows the OLED and the receiver are still part of it, so don't shut those off. But in my living room, I have a living room here. This is my TV, but I want to control my TV separately from the lights. There's probably going to be plenty of times where I want to configure my living room lights without turning on the TV. And that's why I have separate activity groups for my control lights and my living room, because it makes it so I can adjust the TV, turn it off, turn it on, and it's not going to affect my lights at all. Whereas in the theater, I want everything in an activity group because I want my lights to turn off when the theater's not in use in general. None of these devices are ever going to be used outside of the context of the theater, so it makes sense to nest all of these in one group. But living room's completely different. I might watch TV and want the lights off and don't want any configuration at all. So it gives me that really nice expandability. And overall, I'm pretty happy here. I definitely would like to see that integration advance a little bit more, where I can start pulling in some of my scenes. I spent a lot of time setting those up. A little bummed about that. But the most important thing here, though, is that these commands, turning it off, turning it on, will hold the scene that I put in via the Hue app. So as long as I don't press my command to actually make the lights white, they're going to stick to whatever sequence I set in the app. So it's a little of kind of a hybrid thing here where, if I want to set a nice scene, I could still dim it or turn it off from the remote. Or when I need just like bright light, I could do that with my white button here and then set a scene back in the Hue app when I want. So we're closing the gap here, but ultimately, I think what's next in terms of lighting is obviously going to have to be Home Assistant, but in general, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. There's still a little bit more that I want to tinker with. But in general, excited to have the remote back, excited to kind of make some more content about it. Hope this was useful for anyone who is considering setting up, lights with this integration. Just kind of want to make people more aware of the limitations that exist without Home Assistant. But thanks again for checking out the video. Thanks again for checking out the channel. We'll catch you guys in the next one. Let me know what smart light solution you guys are using. You got Home Assistant already. You planning to kind of build that around this remote and reconsidering now? Let me know. Let's talk about it in the comments. Catch you guys later in the next one. Thanks.